One of the biggest challenges finding your way of studying that's most efficient to you, so you're not like spinning your wheels on something like the lecture. If you didn't understand something they said in the lecture, like just skip it, get to the multiple choice, like the meat and potatoes of what the actual exam's going to be. So
Let's welcome our next guest who just recently passed the CPA exam.
I am from Eastern Pennsylvania. I grew up there, and I am now living in Portland. I moved to Portland to finish school at Portland State University, and I ended up getting a job here, so I plan to stay, and I love Portland.
How did you study for the CPA exam in general?
When I first started studying, I would spend way too much time in the details, but overall I've adapted my study style to really know what was efficient for me. And so overall I took Becker. It was provided by the firm that I work for, so I used that and the final review, which was really great. And for myself to feel ready, I actually got the Becker to 90% completion by the time I walked into the exam. So they have a completion rate on the homepage and the dashboard. So my overall study was, okay, if I see that hit 90%, I'm close to being ready, or like I have a chance to pass. So that was kind of my target.
How do you study for multiple choice questions?
So the multiple choice questions I went through, so I kind of layered my studying where I did all the lectures of a chapter, then all of the skills practice, and then went back and did the multiple choice. So when I was starting on the multiple choice, I was actually in a state of review because I hadn't got to that topic for a while. So I would take one pass through them, get maybe 30% right, and then go on to the next one. So I did that kind of layering method throughout the whole exam. So I was constantly going back and doing the multiple choice that I hadn't got up to 100% complete. And then on the multiple choice that 2 times I got it wrong, I made a flashcard and I wrote the question or like some version of the question, and on the back, especially if it was a calculation, I would write out the whole calculation on the back. And it was very time consuming, but I figured out that it helped me a lot just to have that flashcard. So instead of going back to a multiple choice question, I would just flash the flashcard and like imprint it photographically in my brain.
How do you study for simulation questions?
The simulations I would save till the absolute end. So I did that layering method where I was doing all lectures, all skills practice, and then combing through the MCQs. And then when I was all done, I went back to do the sims. So I was in kind of a constant state of review. And I only took one pass through the sims. If I struggled on a sim, I would make a flashcard. By the end, I had a stack of flashcards this big, which is very time consuming and it's definitely not for everyone. But for me, in those final 2 weeks, just having everything that I didn't know in my hands and I could just flash through it, it really helped me out. So yeah, I would take one pass through all the sims and watch the Skill Master videos. Those helped a lot to explain, really conceptualize what was going on.
How do you take study notes?
So I didn't take any notes because everything that I needed was on the flashcards. I was all flashcards for anything that I needed help with. And I feel like it was a lot of writing and you're buying a lot of flashcards. But because I could dwindle them out when I had them memorized, I felt like it was a lot easier to deal with a stack that I was just seeing go down instead of a notebook where you're just kind of paging through, trying to figure out what you remembered. So for me, flashcards were all my notes. I just gave them to a friend that's studying, and she's like, all of these stuff this big. For me, it was about applying the pen to the paper. That's how it was really getting into my brain, and then seeing T accounts, like pensions. I'd have the full pension problem written out, and I could just like flap to that in a square that big, and it was easy for me to just imprint into my brain. So I had them that's a to-do list, but I had them about this size. I don't have any to a phone. It's about that size. They would definitely be dwindled down. I would take all the extraneous information that I already knew. I just needed to know the process. Like if you were solving a variance analysis, I'd put like a quick note about the numbers that they give you in the problem, and on the back, these are the steps on how to solve that variance analysis. And I'd write the numbers, although when I was looking at the card, I'm not actually memorizing the numbers because I'm not getting my calculator out. And it's like, these are the 4 steps. Here's how I get the answer. So There's a good one. Yeah. This is what I really struggled on BEC. Cost accounting. This is the worst. So yeah, I found a good one. So joint cost allocation, sales value known at split off. There's a couple ways to solve it. So on the back I just put, I don't know if that's backwards, but I put just the fact pattern and then the 2 steps. So where are we at? Over here. The first step and then the second step. And I put all the numbers just so it had a format of numbers, but when I was going through, I was just memorizing the processes. Well, I like that too, because I'd make a flashcard and then 2 weeks later, I'm like, well, I've memorized that already. I don't need it. So my stack gets like smaller and smaller and smaller. And then the day before the exam, I just have like, these, and then I just memorize them and good to go. Well, not always good to go, but yeah, sometimes you're like, well, no one else can help me with this material unless they're studying this exam.
Which material did you study first for the CPA exam?
So I started out, first chapter, did all the lectures all the way through, then went back, did all the skills practice. And this is Becker specific, it might be different for other ones. And then I started the multiple choice questions. And I took one pass through, and the ones that were really tricky, I made a flashcard. And then, so once I did one pass through of the whole chapter's multiple choice, I start the next chapter's lectures. And then every day I go back to different modules, MCQs, and kind of take another pass through those. So it sounds a little confusing, but for me, I didn't do practice tests because I felt like I was in a constant state of review that way. So I was always going back and doing old multiple choice and old skills practice that I struggled with. So in that process of doing the MCQs is where I started making flashcards.
How did you stay focused and maintain the drive and self-discipline to pass this exam?
Generally, I'm a very focused person, so that part wasn't very hard. And I was, just getting out of 5-6 years of being at the university, so I went right into studying. So I just did the same thing, the same study methods as I was when I studied before. One thing that I didn't do, and I wish I did do early on, was I didn't take breaks. I was like, I just got to get these done as soon as possible. I'm not going to care about my mental health or my eating. I'll just eat whenever I have time and eat whatever foods are fast. And I learned the first couple exams that started wearing on me because I was just generally not happy, and so I realized that and changed my processes. For the last 2 exams, I had 1 day a week where I was just resetting, just getting out in nature or doing something that I love to do and jumping right back into studying the next day. And that really, really helped. It was hard to do because you just want to study as much as possible every single day. But it's not sustainable for sure. It could be sustainable if you're the kind of person that will pass the exam, all of the exams in 4 months, but if it's taking you 19 months, you can't do that for 19 months.
How did you manage the study time?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge. I was fortunate enough to get in the recruiting cycle at the right time, so I had a full-time offer while I was still in school. So I started studying a little bit while in my last semester, and then had the whole summer and part of the fall before I started in the end of October. So it was very lucky to just I only had a part-time job for 20 hours, and the rest of the time I just studied all day. I just stayed organized by making a plan of what I wanted to do per week, and then each day I'd wake up and try to make a plan of what I was going to do that day. I think 1 day out of all the days, I actually finished everything I thought I was going to finish. Usually I just had to bump it to the next day. So I kept that plan very, very flexible, but just to keep motivated, I did keep making that plan, making that calendar, making my appointments, so I knew I was holding myself accountable to a day. I changed that appointment probably 6 times all in all through Prometric, because I got a week from the appointment, and there was no way I was going to be ready.
What did you do a day before the exam?
So this might be a little bit different than what most people do, but I typically don't study the day before the exam. I'll do something like get out in nature, or back when we could go to restaurants, I would go like take myself to a nice meal or have fun, hang out with friends, and then maybe come home and do some flashcards. But for me, I have a lot of anxiety in the testing center on exam day. So by the day before the exam, I have to know the content so deeply that if there's nothing I'm gonna learn the day before, and I know that. So 2 days before the exam is probably a better representation of what you should do. But by that time, I have all the flashcards that I really need to know before I get on the exam, and they should be dwindled down a lot. I'll maybe do a practice test or two, but I usually stick to my flashcards and then paging through the book, because that nervous energy is starting, and you're just, I don't know, I would always be so hard on myself if I was getting questions wrong 2 days before the exam. So I took out all that, and you can't get a flashcard wrong. So I would stick with those, and just going through a lecture or the book to see if there was anything that I had kind of left over.
What was the most difficult section for you?
Regulation was definitely the hardest section for me. I am in tax at Moss Adams, but I was in my tax season while I was studying for the exam. So I was studying from December to February of 2020 for that exam. The difference between reg and the other previous exams I took, FAR and audit, were that reg didn't have any journal entries or any balancing equations. It was just you had to know these non-intuitive facts about why things are what they are because of tax law, and that kind of made no sense to me in an intuitive way. So I did struggle with that, especially with basis. Basis can get really tricky, and not having a firm grasp on the differences between entities, between S corps and LLCs and all that. They're all kind of have different issues with basis, and now that I know a little bit more on the basics of basis and entities, it probably would have been a little bit easier to take it after tax season. But I struggled for that. It took 4 months to take FAR, because I did take FAR 2 times. Reg. I took 4 months to take reg, and I did fail on the first time because I had an exam that was about to expire. So I was like, well, I'll jump in and take it. I'm gonna lose it anyway. I'll sit for it and see, what I score. So I knew I wasn't going to pass, and I did end up getting a 58. So I wasn't even close, but I hadn't finished the material. I hadn't even got through the whole book. So I went back. I studied for another month after that failing score, and went back and studied. Took it in 4 weeks, and then passed that with a 77. Finally. During busy season, my first busy season, so don't recommend that. Luckily, I had done the bulk of the studying in December and halfway through January. We didn't really start getting busy until mid-January into February. So at that point, I was just reviewing. So I had review before and after work. We did like 12-hour days, so I'd come in 2 hours early and just do review, and then I took the bus so I could do flashcards on the bus. So I was really only studying about 3 hours a day during the week for the last month. But the bulk of my studying was done before busy season.
In what order did you take the CPA exam?
So I took FAR first. I knew that was gonna cause me the most pain. I studied for about 2 months before I took FAR, and again, I had a score, or my NTS was about to expire for FAR, so I ended up jumping in and seeing what I could do with FAR, and I didn't pass that. Didn't pass with a 62, and then studied I actually took 2 more months and studied for FAR, and then finally passed that one. And so the FAR was a very long process, and I knew it was going to be challenging for me, so I wanted to get that all out of the way before my 18-month clock starts. So my 18-month clock didn't start till 6 months after I'd started studying. So I was like, I can get the rest done within 18 months. By the skin of my teeth, I got them all done. After FAR, I took audit, and I did fail audit on the first time with a 74, the worst score. And it was heartbreaking because I actually walked out of the exam feeling really confident, which would never happen. I was like, no, I definitely passed that. I felt good. And yeah, so I got a 74. I went back in, studied only 3 more weeks because I knew I just wanted 1 point. I just needed to get it to 75. So I studied 3 more weeks, and I was able to get up to an 82 on my second take of audit. So that was good. And I loved studying for audit. It was just the most fun of the exams for me. So after audit, I took reg, and I did have to take that 2 times because I failed the first one. Second take, I passed it with a 77, so just good enough. And lastly, I took BEC. The whole summer, the testing centers were closed, so I didn't actually get to take BEC until October was my appointment. And I actually passed that on the first round, which was amazing because I wasn't used to opening NASBA and seeing a passing score for the first time. So it was really great to only have to take that one time.
How long did it take you to finish the CPA exam?
Between the time that I started studying for FAR and when I found my final passing score, it was 22 months of all in all. So I studied for FAR for about 3 months before I took my first exam, and then I failed that exam. So then I studied more and didn't pass. I didn't pass my first exam until I was studying for about 6 months. So that kind of stretched out the process a little bit longer. And then because of COVID, the testing centers were closed, so that stretched me out a little bit longer with BEC.
What were your top CPA exam study preparation mistakes?
Definitely, I wouldn't say a mistake, but I think I spun my wheels a lot in the beginning, just trying to figure out my learning style, what was most efficient for me, whether it was watching the lectures over and over or doing the skills practice over and over. I learned that for myself, flashcards worked for me, getting a pen in my hand and writing and being able to flip through those at the end of the night. That was how I succeeded at studying. And I think sometimes it can be easy to just do everything and take all this time before you actually finally listen to yourself and say, this is how I study the best way. I'll just focus on this and keep efficiency. But another tip I would have, and I think because I've had such a tumultuous journey, just having perseverance is the way that's going to get you through these exams. If you're not someone that's just going to jump in there and pass with a high score on the first time, if you're not that kind of person, you might have to see some passing scores. You might have to see some failing scores, and it's very disheartening to open up a score that you really think you passed, or you gave it your effort and you've sacrificed so much, and you see that it's a failing score. It's very disheartening, and it's easy to kind of get on yourself for not succeeding and not passing when you thought you could. And it's really just all about closing your score, just getting back to studying, jumping right back into it, and saying that it's okay. Everyone's journey is completely different. And so that is definitely a tip. I know someone who took 15 exams before actually becoming a CPA, and that is perseverance. So many of them had dropped off after the 18-month window. So many failures. You just got to keep going. If you really want to be a CPA, you just keep taking these exams and you'll be one.
And what advice would you like to share?
my biggest tip would be to take breaks. I think just putting so much pressure on yourself to get certain sections done at a certain time, and maybe you have your appointment set and you don't think that you're going to be ready on time, just move the appointment and just be flexible with yourself. Not everyone might have the luxury to take a full day to not study if they have other things going on, but I just took one full day to reset and do something that really helped me come back with a fresh attitude. Another thing, I would definitely recommend purchasing one exam at a time for your first exam purchase. It's really going to be tempting to purchase all 4 or purchase 2, at least in Oregon. You get like a $50 discount if you bundle your purchases. I had 2 exams that just completely fell off that I wasn't going to be able to pass, and then I had 2 others that I knew I wasn't going to pass that I went in and I failed because I had just purchased them too early. So I definitely recommend just try the first one, see how long it takes you, then go on to the second one. I've had friends just lose so much money on exams that just expire. It's very important not to be hard on yourself and just like get through these exams. And to not underestimate them. It's easy, in school, you can get A's on your exams. You're only studying a couple concepts, and then you're going in to take your final or your midterm, and you've got those concepts mastered. The CPA exam is so comprehensive, and although they're testing you on a limited depth of the knowledge, there's just so much more than just an exam in school. So that definitely caught me off guard a little bit. So just not underestimating this. It's hard, and you just gotta not be down on yourself. So many people struggle with these exams. That's why there's a 50% pass rate or even lower in some states. So just gotta keep going.